Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the second of our Lunch and Learn webinars designed to spark conversations about a variety of residential and commercial zoning topics. This webinar series is a part of Code Create Vienna, the process of updating the town's zoning and subdivision codes. My name is Kelly O'Brien, and I'm the Principal Planner for the Department of Planning and Zoning. And I'm joined today by Planner Andrea West. Andrea will be giving the presentation today, and I will be moderating. Sorry, let me adjust. Sorry about that. We'll start, make sure everyone see everything. I will be moderating today. Bear with us as we have some technical difficulties here, apparently. Let me get the screen up. Again, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the second of our Lunch and Learn webinars designed to spark conversations about a variety of residential and commercial zoning topics. The webinar series is a part of Code Create Vienna, the process of updating the town's zoning and subdivision codes. My name is Kelly O'Brien. I'm the Principal Planner for the Department of Planning and Zoning, and I'm joined today by Planner Andrea West. Andrea will be giving the presentation today, and I will be moderating the question and answer portion at the end. You are welcome to ask questions throughout the presentation using the Q&A feature in the Zoom. However, all questions will be held to the end of the presentation. If you are watching this recording after it has happened, please email your questions to codecreate@viennava.gov, and we'll be happy to respond. And this email will be provided at the end of the presentation as well. With that, I turn it over to Andrea to tell us what is lot coverage.
Hi, again, I'm Andrea West. I am a planner here at the town of Vienna. I do a lot of the plan review when it comes to single family homes, and also do the plan review for the commercial districts and the Board of Architectural Review. So today we want to talk about what is lot coverage. I'm going to go through a few things about lot coverage. First is, what is it? It's a section of our code that is not something that's in zoning codes everywhere, but it's specific to Vienna. The history of lot coverage in the code, and how we regulate lot coverage and review for lot coverage. So to start, this is how our code reads today. Lot coverage, it's within our area requirements for the RS16 zone, which the way our code is written, that means it applies to all residential zoning districts. So it is 25, lot coverage is not more than 25% of a lot shall be covered by buildings, accessory buildings, automobile parking spaces and access, sports courts, tennis courts, patios, and terraces. And then decks are regulated by a separate section, which does not allow them to take up more than 5% of the total lot area. So the lot area, just to clear up what that means, that is the size of your lot that is typically noted on your plat or other records related to your property's size, shape, things of that nature. So that's when we say lot area, that's what we're referring to. This reads as, so impervious surfaces are what we count towards lot coverage. So we want to clear up that first conception. Not quite. Impervious surfaces are a different type of calculation that is used in the development of land, and it relates specifically to the infiltration of water into the ground. So while lot coverage and impervious surfaces have a lot in common, they are two different things. Lot coverage is in zoning, impervious surfaces are things that are reviewed by our Department of Public Works related to groundwater runoff and things of that nature. As you can see, I found a very technical definition here that explains what impervious surfaces are, what they do. It's a very important thing, but it's not what we're talking about for zoning. So a little bit of a history to kind of reach back to explain that this is not linked to the specifics of impervious surfaces and groundwater as they're related. The first mention, or one of the first mentions of lot coverage, is in our 1956 code. This is the town of Vienna's zoning code. Impervious surfaces and the regulations that we have today for that, those began in 2014. There was discussions, there was, that was becoming popular to kind of talk about before, but we have regulations for lot coverage that go back to 1956. So here's the code section, and it's interesting is that the definition of lot coverage has changed over time. This has similar to the definition we have today, but it has this: for purposes of computing lot coverage, a minimum of 200 square feet of accessory building or automobile parking space shall be required for each family occupying such lot. So they were talking about automobile parking in 1956, relating it to lot coverage. So in 1957, we have our master plan that there's a quote here that I think starts to talk about why lot coverage and limiting it was important to the town of Vienna and the character that they were trying to develop through their zoning code. And it's this last paragraph under this section here that says, the large wide lots and the open spaces between the residences will be an important attribute in maintaining high values. So in the 50s, we were talking about using this as preserving open space in our residential districts. And in 1966, we have a very similar definition as we did in the 56, 69. And in 1991, there was a significant change to the lot coverage definition. So that removed some of the discussion of specifically stating that you had to have 200 square feet for things like automobile parking, and made it a little more general as to what it included. At this time, decks were also pulled out of that 25% and have their own 5%. So you're up to a total of 30% now versus decks and all of your residential structures and things that count towards lot coverage coming out of that initial 25%. So throwing a little bit into my statement that impervious surfaces and lot coverage are not connected for a short time between 2004 and 2007, based on the inclusion of grid pavers and other types of impervious surfaces being allowed as a parking surface. There was an interpretation that we would allow credits for those to be used towards lot coverage. That was done for 3 years and has in 2007 was discontinued, but there really is not that connection between lot coverage and impervious surfaces or pervious paving and things like that anymore. All right, so now we have a little survey.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. So we're trying out the feature of Zoom, so bear with us. It's a poll. We're going to ask you to tell us, what do you think is not included towards lot coverage? So you should see on your screen a poll. I'm going to leave it open for a few minutes to give everyone a chance. The question, and you may need to stretch your window there. The question is, what does not count towards lot coverage? And the options are pools, decks, steps, driveway, or treehouse.
I think we need Jeopardy music.
Yeah. I'll play the, here we go. I have to start it over. Here we go. Replay.
You can pick multiple answers, I believe. Correct, Kelly?
Yes, you can choose multiple
answers.
Yes,
it is a multiple choice, so pick all that apply. And that question came from the Q&A. I grabbed that.
Yes, thank you. Okay, we've got about 75% voting. So it's been about a minute. Any other last quick minute? I'm going to end the polling and share our results. So Andrew, you can help me. Are you seeing our shared results here?
I am seeing the shared results. So 39% say that pools do not count towards lot coverage. Decks, 26%. Steps, 35%, driveway, 4%, and tree houses, 74%.
So how did they do?
So we did pretty well. So I'm going to talk through the next couple slides about what counts towards lot coverage and what doesn't. So keeping in mind what you might have selected here as we go through the next few slides.
Okay.
All right, so first, what counts towards lot coverage? Again, if you've applied for a application to the town of Vienna in the past few years or are thinking about it, this is a question you're gonna have to answer. part of your application. So principal buildings and porches. Zoning codes use this term principal building quite frequently. And in this case, when it comes to your residential lot, that's your house typically. And so lot coverage will include your house, all of your porches, especially your covered porches and stoops, and then your accessory buildings. An accessory building is something like a shed, a detached garage, any sort of gazebo or structure that you have that's not attached to your house. That is typically called an accessory building. What also counts is decks with roofs and screened porches. So we talked about before in the history of lot coverage that decks were removed from that definition to have their own separate 5%. That is only referring to opened decks that do not have a roof. Once they have a roof or they've got screens around them, they become part of your lot coverage. And parking spaces and drives. I know a couple people had that driveways did not count towards lot coverage. They do. We count the entirety of the driveway towards your lot coverage. Patios and terraces. And this is an example where the patio is partially gravel and partially a paver stone. We would count anything that is used as a patio in this case towards the lot coverage. Sports courts, and this includes tennis courts, as our definition said. So if you have a basketball net and a concrete pad in the rear yard, that would count towards your lot coverage. And then we have lead walks greater than 5 feet. So a lead walk is the sidewalks that you have throughout your property to get from, say, your driveway to your front door, from your back door to if you have a pool or an accessory structure or a patio. Those are lead walks. If they are greater than 5 feet, we count the entirety of that portion towards your lot coverage. That has a lot to do with, at that point, they're typically a patio, things like that, but they will count. And then all automobile parking areas. So even grid pavers, you see here, this is a permeable surface that has grass in between, but it's used for parking. So we would count that towards lot coverage. And one important thing to clarify, that this is the footprint of these structures. It is not the floor area. So if your house has 2 stories, we do not count the 2 stories against your lot coverage. It's just the footprint. So here's the list. It's principal buildings and porches and stoops, accessory buildings, decks with roofs and screened porches, automobile parking spaces and drives, sports courts and tennis courts, patios, stoops, and terraces, sidewalks, lead walks greater than 5 feet, and the grid paver parking areas. So again, you're probably saying, this sounds to me like it's all the impervious surfaces. Not quite. We have quite a few exemptions to lot coverage. Cantilevered buildings portions. So as long as they don't have a support structure that comes down to the ground and they're not part of your foundation, we exclude those from lot coverage. As we've talked about, open decks, excluded. Window wells. A lot of times window wells are part of the foundation, especially when you're looking at an egress situation. We do not count those. Tree houses that are less than 256 square feet do not count towards lot coverage. If you have a tree house that is over 256 square feet, we'll talk. I'd like to see it also. Basement areaways. This is one that is specifically called out in the code. And I know we have a question that's going to come up in the Q&A about this. The intent of the basement areaway exclusion is to treat it as a lead walk. So once the basement areaway goes beyond being servicing the door that is there and any windows serving as a window well and becomes a patio, then we are counting your areaway. I know that as there's walkout basements and things like that, the areaway and what's an areaway and what's a patio, it can become a little bit convoluted, but we kind of have to look at each plan and help make that determination. Pergolas. Pergolas do not count towards lot coverage as long as the joists that are on the roof are greater than 16 inches on center. The majority of pergolas, the actual structural joists, are well beyond that. I'm learning about the structural side of this, but the intent is that it does not become a true roof. It can't structurally support that. Pools. We do not count pools towards the lot coverage, and we allow a 5-foot buffer from the coping out that does not count towards your lot coverage serve as essentially a lead walk that goes around the pool. Landscaping, retaining walls, terraces, like gravel areas that are used for landscaping and not for patios, those do not count towards lot coverage. And steps. Steps are specifically an inclusion in the code from the lot coverage. So as you see, it comes up, we've got 2 columns of things that are excluded from lot coverage. And it's something that if you do have a question, when you're doing your permit, if something counts, we're happy to talk to you and figure out where it might fall in this list based on kind of the criteria, as you describe it. And so the next thing is, how do I measure lot coverage? If we understand what it is, we're looking at what do we want to see when we go to either start talking to a design professional about coming up with a project or propose something or things of that nature. So again, reiterate, it is footprint and not total floor area. So if you do have a deck that is 2 stories, we don't charge you for both stories when it comes to deck coverage. It's just the footprint. So we ask that applicants to the town of Vienna use a scaled plat of survey to calculate their lot coverage from. A plat of survey is an invaluable document when it comes to what's on your property, figuring out what you can do with your property. And lot coverage is no exception to that. So we ask that those features are itemized. And by that, we mean broken down between the different features as you see here. We have an example that shows the different colors on the upper right, and then what they align to on the existing plat. So the house, as you see in blue, I don't actually have amounts on this. This is a sample survey, so we don't have amounts, but I'll show you a sample calculation on the next slide. So how do you use this plat of survey to calculate your lot coverage? You could do it by hand. The surveys typically are a 1 inch to a certain number of feet. If most of the features on your property are square and easy to calculate by hand, you could do that, but that is my least recommended method. The other option is that there are software programs like Adobe programs where you can use scales in them to calculate the lot coverage. That is probably the second, because with that you can do curved shapes, things that are not a regular shape. But the most recommended method is to have a surveyor create your lot coverage analysis for you. They can use their software, the tools they have, to measure the size, the footprint of your structures to the most specific degree. This is especially important if you are getting close to the 25% lot coverage, or you're designing a structure that's going to be very close to a setback or encroach in a setback. You're going to want to have the most precise measurements. I always tell applicants, if you want to get the most out of your property, that's probably the best way to go. So here is kind of a sample lot coverage that we have created, lot coverage analysis. If someone wanted to add an additional, in this case, they're adding an additional deck in the rear and additional driveway, as you see in the front of the property. We've highlighted those in yellow. So in this case, the applicant has selected to draw them themselves on the plat to scale with the dimensions, and then give us a lot coverage calculation that shows us that they have room to make these changes to the property. So the first section of the chart you can see is the existing lot coverage. Each item is broken down. We have the total square feet of all those items, the total lot area, and the percentage that creates. Giving us those items listed out helps us go back and double check the work. That's essentially what the reviewer is doing, is we're checking your work. And we're making sure that what your design professional or measured is correct to again make sure that your proposed project meets code and that that's what you intended to apply for. So in this case, the additional driveway is what's going to count towards the lot coverage of the 25% lot coverage. So this proposed driveway will add 220 square feet. So they provided us with that total, the new proposed total square footage, and the new proposed coverage percent. So in this case, the additional driveway only comes to 24.3% of the total lot area. So in this case, we would be able to approve this driveway with the condition that there were any other setbacks and things that it needed to be met. Driveway is typically it's 1 foot off the property line that we request. So we would double check that that was the case, and this would be an approved driveway. The deck that they've provided. So they've given us that the total square footage of the deck is going to be 563.5 square feet. That would be 4.9% of their lot area. So that we would also be able to approve. So once you have done this analysis and you know you're ready to apply, we are taking all of our small scale residential plans through our IDT plans portal. And so I will always have a little shout out to that. We're very excited to have that. It's a good tool for staff and applicants to have to see what is going on with their projects. And everything we talked about today, we actually have a kind of quick guide on our website that you can go and download and keep or give to a professional if you're working with a design professional or a surveyor to kind of explain what we're looking for. We have a link here. I know that this PowerPoint will be available, and but this is on our website. So, Ms. O'Brien, put it over to you.
Thank you, Andrea. So I just wanted to also talk about in the beginning of this year, pre-COVID, March 2nd, 2020, we had a community conversation event. And it was one of the items that we were trying to get some input on was a proposal by Councilmember Patel about creating an outdoor living space option. You'll see on the screen here, we've got the rendering kind of similar to the graphic that Andrea showed in the example. We show an example of what a property is at 24.3% lot coverage. And then maybe if you wanted to add 5% more, what would that look like? So we did offer up a survey for a couple weeks, and we got those results. And part of that event, I think Andrew can click the next slide, we had a 3D model that we built and had showing, actual physical to scale. You can pick it up, move your deck, move your patio, put a covered deck. What does that look like if you go from a stoop to a porch, or if you add a driveway extension? So we did have a 3D kind of version to kind of help people get an idea of, if I added this, what would that look like? So in that vein, next slide, we are going to ask you now, what would you include as an exception towards lot coverage? So I'm going to start the next poll. So you should see, what would you include as an exception to lot coverage? If you need to scroll or expand your window, it is multiple choice. You can select more than one. We have covered decks, screened porches, patios, terraces, sport courts, driveways, other, or none, if you don't believe any of these should be added as an exception. I should have the music start again. Okay, we're at about 70% voted, and give it another 10 seconds. We have a full minute. Okay, I am going to end the polling and share the results. So it looks like the top vote getter is patios. You like to see patios included as an exception to lot coverage, with a second follow-up of no more exceptions. Excellent. All right, we will share that with our consultants. I'm going to stop sharing the results and give it back to Andrea.
All right. So there have been a couple questions that have come in through the Q&A feature on Zoom. So I'd love to go through those and answer those live. A few of them we did answer through the question, and I did some written answers, but was, are tree houses permitted in Vienna? Yes, they are. We don't have any specific prohibitions on them, but the height of them is concern. 14 feet is typically the height limit, and that would be the peak of the roof or the edge of the railing. It's also something you should check with Fairfax County as far as if you want to go very large, a building code issue, something of that nature. The question about lead walks was, is it the width or the length? And it is the width of the lead walk, the 5 foot that we're keeping. That's in line with a standard sidewalk size that you would see on a street. That's reference. So some of the other questions. So, sorry, it moves. The new homes being built in Vienna, this is more, I believe, more of a something that as far as future code. The new homes being built in Vienna may meet the footprint regulations, but their height and visual weight can overwhelm a lot and integration with the homes around it. Do we expect this to be considered in future code? I think this should be included. We don't know what will be included in that future code. I think feedback like this will be important to bring forward. So if you have conversations like this, we'll be keeping track, and please contribute that information as this process goes on.
Andrea,
yes.
sorry to interrupt. This is Cindy.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit in responding to that question about the height that's allowed in the residential zones?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So the height in residential districts and our commercial districts is 35 feet. And that is measured from the average front grade. So taking points, the elevation points at the front of the house, the front wall, or where the foundation is, where it meets essentially the dirt that goes around the foundation, and then to the peak of the roof. So in Vienna, when new homes are proposed, each proposed project site plan comes with that analysis. And that is one of the things that staff is double checking, that meets the 35-foot height limit.
And the thing to add also is that it's limited to 35 feet in residential zone districts and 2.5 stories.
Yes, thank you. Yes. And another question is, why aren't pools included in the lot coverage? Footprints are often large. Pools are, I can't speak specifically to the rationale of pools being excluded, other than that they are not necessarily structures that are going to be coming up out of the ground. The 5-foot inclusion is there's typically a pathway around them required, sometimes I believe by the construction code. But there is a limit on the size of pools in the code. There is a whole nother section that the pool, I believe, can't take, I believe it's 30% of the required rear yard. And then the pools actually have to meet some of the same setbacks as structures, especially on corner properties. So there is a limit on pools. It's a different, but it is a percentage restriction.
And since you mentioned setbacks, we didn't really address setbacks in this presentation. This is more about the lot coverage, but setbacks would also affect the placement of decks and driveways. And can you get just a little bit into the setback and how that affects?
Yes. So we have there are, just as though there's lot coverage and things that are subject to lot coverage, there are in the code certain things that are held to a strict adherence to setbacks. So setbacks would be on each side of the property, depending on your zoning district, there are certain distances that structures need to be set back from that property line. So for example, in our RS10, the front yard setback is 25 feet, the side yard setbacks are 12 feet, and the rear yard is 35 feet. So the rear yard is 35 feet through all of our residential zoning districts. It's the front and the side setbacks that change. So there are exceptions to those, such as decks are allowed to encroach up to 4 feet into side yard setbacks and 10 feet into the rear yard setback. Patios are not subject to setbacks. Accessory structures below a certain height are not subject to the same setbacks. They have their own set of setbacks. So we, when evaluating proposals, are looking at those in addition to your lot coverage calculation. So that can also help impact what structures can be built where and the footprint of actual building you can have on your lot. I hope if there's a more specific question about that, please let me know. I can be happy to answer. For lot coverage, the pool area is counted, just not the swimming pool itself. Is one of the reasons because the pool area absorbs rainwater. It's not. It is not linked to, as far as I am aware, that exception is not linked to stormwater runoff. And I believe for the purposes of impervious, your pool actually does count in some way to impervious. So again, the engineering side that I am not familiar with, it does count. Again, it's about the character. It's a zoning requirement, so I am not sure. And it is the pool, the water area of the pool itself and a 5-foot lead walk is excluded from coverage. It is not included. But again, there is also a percentage limit on how large a pool can be in a yard.
So yeah, Andrea, I also have a question that came in via email just before our webinar today. For the lot coverage, I was hoping areaways can be discussed in detail. It is my understanding that they do not count in lot coverage, but I've had projects where we were asked to count it due to the size, if greater than 5 feet. From what I've seen, 6 feet to 8 foot areaway landings are becoming more common. So my question would be, is there a formal determination or guidance on areaways for lot coverage that can be followed uniformly? This would help us plan better and alert future homeowners before performing a formal submission.
I tried to talk a little bit about that in when I was talking about the exclusions. I think what started to kind of become is the areaways went from being a door to some of them became patios, and those do need to be counted towards lot coverage because it's area that's being used outside of the use as a window well and a lead walk. So we do have, as long as the patio, excuse me. So yes, so the question that came in is, so double doorways are usually 6 to 8 foot wide. Would those be okay or case by case? Those are okay. That is what sort of changed with areaways that made that interpretation become a little less clear. Now that we've gotten many coming in and we're seeing, as long as the areaway there is serving both the door and functioning as a window well, we are not saying that it has to be smaller than 5 feet. And we are reviewing them on a case-by-case basis. Unfortunately, at this time, we do not have a formal determination at this time, but we've been working to figure that out. Is there any requirement for builders to notify homeowners of lot coverage requirements before construction begins? I think the lot coverage is going to be part of the plans from the beginning. It's going to be part of the site plan. It's going to be, so I don't regulate how a homeowner and a builder communicate with each other. That's not my role in the process, but construction will not begin on a house until we know that it meets lot coverage. So at some point, I believe that conversation has to be happening, but I unfortunately am not part of that conversation. And then a clarification to it's 5 feet for areaways, 5 feet to the outside the wall or landing. We're looking at the landing. Walls or something and landscape type features are excluded from lot coverage. So we're typically looking at the landings of those, sort of like we would a stoop, but a little bit as an exclusion. So any additional questions?
I just want to remind you, if any questions pop up in your head after this, you're always welcome and encouraged to email us. Andrew, if you could pop.
There's one more question.
Okay, good.
So there are also limits. So we have a question essentially about cantilevered features on some of the houses. And if those cantilevered features encroach into a setback, we do have limits on the width and depth that they can go out from the house into a setback. If they are within the buildable area, there are also limits on how much of the facade those can take up. So it's cantilevered features are an exception for lot coverage, and that's something that if you would want to see be considered by our consultants and through the process, I would mention, that's something we can keep and pass on to them. So, all right, thank you. Sorry, Kelly. It's one more question I wanted to grab.
No, definitely. As they come in, we want to make sure all the questions are answered. And we don't mean to cut anybody off. We just want to make sure that we appreciate your time and we know everyone is very busy. We love that everyone's enjoying this. We do have the next couple set up already in 2 weeks. We have November 6th, well, 2 weeks roughly. Yeah, November 6th. I have to fix that number in there. That's not November 6th. So in 2 weeks, it's What's Your Sign? We'll have Andrea joining us again, talking about signs, and more specifically commercial signs. Is more of a commercial focus. And then December, we have working from home. So if you've ever wanted to start a home business and wanted to know what was involved in that, Jennifer Murphy in our planning department will be assisting us in telling us what the process is and what's included.
The What's Your Sign, that date is November 20th.
Thank you, Cindy. Yes, November 20th. That was our planning director, Cindy Petcack, with the assist. Next slide, please, Andrea. And all of these, the lunch and learns, all of the PDF from this presentation today, the video of this presentation, everything is available on our website, codecreatevienna.com. We've also added a fun little trivia quiz that a little zoning trivia to see how well you think you know Town of Vienna zoning. We'll be changing that every month. Just 3 quick questions. You'll also be seeing us out and about at Shop and Stroll over the next few weekends, and a lot of fun ways that we hope to get some conversation going and get your input and feedback. So again, we thank everyone, and we look forward to getting your emails and hearing your thoughts about all of these topics. And if you have a suggestion for a topic for a future Lunch and Learn, we'd love to hear those as well. So thank you all very much. We very much appreciate it. And thank you, Andrea, for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.